Hi, I'm Zoe Desmond, the founder of Frollo, the award-winning app for single parents that features both community and dating modes. And I'm also co-author, along with my wonderful friend Rebecca Cox that I made through Frollo, of the book How to Be a Happy Single Parent. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Frollo podcast. Today, I am very excited to be joined by Marcie Shaoul. Marcie is the author of The Co-Parenting Method, a 6-step program designed to help you co-parent with confidence, clarity, and peace of mind, no matter what your current challenges. Marcie, welcome to the Frollo podcast. This is a topic that will be very important and hopefully beneficial to many of our listeners. So thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Zoe. It's great to be here.
Well, first of all, congratulations, because just before we started recording, you mentioned that you were on This Morning last week and that your book has already gone to the bestseller list on Amazon, which is huge. So
crazy.
Yeah, really exciting. So yeah, well done, and feel very lucky that before it's actually released on Thursday, that you're going to give us some insights into what it's about and hopefully a bit of a cheat sheet for our Frollo users and some really helpful takeaways as well. So before we get into the book and the work you're doing, I'm going to make an assumption that this work came out of a personal experience. So I'd love to hear more about your story and what led you to writing this book and doing this work.
Yeah, of course. Like a lot of these things, it comes out of personal experience. And it was in 2009 and our son was 1. And when we got divorced, when we were separating, and, I had nobody in my peer group at that time that was separating, no real reference points. And it just really felt like someone had taken my life and kind of shaken it up, turned it upside down, because suddenly, I'd gone from being in this little family unit to being a single mum and literally not knowing which way was up. And, there was a point in that journey quite early on when I was out with a friend of mine, and he was divorced. He was the only person I knew who was divorced. And he said to me, you know what, every child, he actually said every son, because we had a son, but every son needs access to his daddy. And there was something in that, Zoe, that statement that just rang super true for me. And it kind of cut through everything, all the noise, all the advice that I was getting at the time. And I just thought, gosh, yeah, that's true. And it made me realize on some kind of quite primal level that whatever was going on in our adult separation that was really tricky, and it was tricky, it was difficult, that I needed to find a way through this so we could continue to parent our son together. So that was kind of when it was born, I suppose. And at the time, I was working in the diplomatic service. So I was working between governments and civil society, NGOs, and getting them to communicate with each other, getting them to listen well to each other and talk to each other in language that they could both understand, because they would often talk about similar things, but using really different words and really different processes. And so kind of cutting through all that to help them communicate. And I started to realize that, hang on, there were some similarities here. That actually when you're in conflict, you need to be able to listen and hear and do all of those things as well as, continue your journey together. And I retrained in 2015, 2016, and became a coach. And then it was all of that, if you like, all of those kind of key ingredients mixed together that brought me to start the Co-Parent Way and develop the Co-Parenting Method to help other people, because there was just no North Star out there. People going through this, like everybody's lives are turned upside down. How do you get through it?
Yeah, that's amazing. I felt like you were telling my own story, actually, when I became a single parent. A lot of how it actually weirdly makes me emotional thinking back and hearing someone explain it in a way that really reminds me of how I felt during that time. and also the challenges of co-parenting, because it's different in lots of situations. And from my own experience and from my own learnings of other single parents through the Frollo community and other really great Frollo friends that that are in my life. It's not a linear path, and but it is what you said there about cutting through the noise and about that kind of really kind of getting to the core of seeing it as, what's important for our children, is just so crucial. But of course, as I'm sure we're going to get into in the conversation, there are so many different challenges and layers to being able to kind of focus in that way. So so really, really excited to learn more. And then also what you said about how the dots connect and how your previous work kind of lent itself to what you're doing now. Also, it's funny how when you kind of look back and you see dots connect, like that, it's pretty cool. I feel like it means that it's a path you're meant to be on.
I agree
Yeah.
with you. Yeah.
Amazing. So then, Marcie, in your own personal co-parenting relationship, what did that journey look like from the beginning, and how has it evolved over time?
We both made mistakes, right? We both made mistakes along the way. What I think we were both able to do was to just keep our son right at the front of everything that we were doing, and recognizing that, okay, we might not agree with each other, but what's best, Blake, he's called Blake, what's best for Blake? And how are we going to keep him at the front and center when all of these difficult things are going on? And, my ex-husband, he was really good at holding the line, at really kind of understanding about boundaries. And I found that quite hard to start with, like we would suddenly gone from a relationship where we'd been together since we were 18 or 19 and been together for 12 years and shared everything. And then, find it quite hard to not be able to share anymore. And at first, the boundaries thing was quite hard, but over time and, with the benefit of time, you can start to see patterns and what was best for our son. And really quickly, the thing that we both did well was, telling each other what had happened at our house when Blake had been with us. And so there was a lot of handover. And when your child is that small, like he was 1, right? You need to hand over. You need to kind of tell everything because there's no information coming from the child, literally. So we had to do good communication, and we had to do it quite, without all the rest of the separation impacting on that. So that was something that we did well. And then, as it evolved and we both met new people and we both had new kids, other kids, it was, then we had to kind of keep adjusting. So what I would say, Zoe, was just like this constant flexing, this constant relearning as we went. And that can be hard, right? You just think you're settled in one thing and then, oh God, there's something else we've got to think about. And adjust again. I like stability. I like structure. So sometimes for me that was quite difficult. But new partners really kind of helped, I think, as well. It eventually, just kind of, we have 4 parents. He has 4 parents effectively now, and I think for me, when I realized that was quite difficult at first, but then I had to be quite pragmatic. I was just like, well, look, he really does have 4 parents. He's got a stepmom and he's got a stepdad, as well as me and his dad. And we have to work together to make this work. We're in this for the long term, right? He was so little that I had to really get my head around the fact that, this is a long game. This is many marathons. This is not a 100-meter sprint. And I had to suck it up as well a bit, like we all probably have to.
It sounds like, you've obviously given me a very kind of high level overview of your situation. And I'm sure there's been lots of trial and error involved, but it sounds like on the whole, it's been pretty kind of aligned and respectful co-parenting journey. What about for those people who feel like, communication creates flare-ups, or it's just there's for people in the most difficult, challenging situation where either one or both people can't seem to be able to kind of communicate in a way that's just child focused, or for those kind of co-parenting. I use the term co-parenting to explain the child going between two homes, not actually kind of co-parenting effectively, but for really young children, that where they should be communicating about how the child slept, what the child has eaten, if there's any like issues or temperatures or coughs or whatever. But if that's not even possible, where do people? Yeah, what do you say to those people?
It's a great question, and it's I see it a lot in my work. And the first thing that I would say, if you're listening and that's where you're at, just want you to reframe this whole situation slightly and think long term. Think to when your kids are grown up. How do you want them to talk about this time? How do you want this time to have impacted them? I would probably, bet that 99.9% of people listening would go, well, I wanted it to have a minimum impact on them. I didn't want it to affect them negatively. I want it to be an okay experience. I want them to say that, I want my kids to say that we tried our best and that we did okay. And then when you can think like that, you need to ask yourself, all right, I can't change my ex. I can't do anything to change their behavior. What is it that I can tweak? Even if that doesn't feel fair to you right now, because you may have gone through something really difficult and trust may have broken down. I get that. I really, really do. But what is it that you can tweak, that you can modify in your own behavior and how you communicate with your ex to help get you to that place where your kids go, oh, you know what? My parents did all right. They did okay. Is it something like smiling at handover? Is it washing the PE kit? Is it sending some communication without any loaded or passive aggressive or aggressive even words in there? Is it just a tweak that you can do that will help you get there? And very often, Zoe, when you can help someone just make that first step, it becomes a hell of a lot easier to kind of keep walking that pathway. And what you find is, even if your ex is really confrontational and your ex is really aggressive, when you change the way that you interact with them, they will start to modify how they interact back with you.
The following is a paid advertisement from BetterHelp. I want to talk about mental health for a minute. Being a single parent comes with its highs and lows, and as single parents, it's so important to make sure we look after ourselves in the process. That's why I'm excited to introduce you to BetterHelp, the online therapy service that's here to support you every step of the way. With BetterHelp, you can connect with registered therapists from the comfort of your own home. Whether you're feeling overwhelmed, stressed, or just need someone to talk to, they're here to help. Plus, as a Frollo member, you get an exclusive 25% off your first month. Just visit betterhelp.com/Frollo. That's betterhelp.com/Frollo. So that's very helpful. So really the power is with you to, to get things off to the right start, instead of feeling like, or focusing on, this is a disaster, there's nothing I can do, it's a lost cause, the other person just isn't capable of being respectful or whatever. That then it's just about focusing on what it is that you can do to be the best parent and co-parent for your child's benefit, and trusting that, leading by example will help make a shift.
Yeah. And you know what? Even if your ex doesn't, if they don't come back and if they don't engage with you, still hold that line of being respectful, of being polite. You don't need to be friendly. It just needs to be a bit transactional, but where you're giving them the information that they need. And that means that you're creating this safe space for your child, right? That your environment with them is safe and stable, that it's not explosive, that it doesn't use difficult language, inflammatory language. And that goes a really long way in helping your kids feel grounded. And that's what this is all about, really.
So going to your book, the co-parenting method. So it's a 6-step program, without kind of giving us the full cheat sheet, because I'm sure people will benefit from buying the book and having it as a tool book, guidebook to hand. Can you give us a breakdown of what the 6 steps are?
Yeah, of course I can. It's a really it's a tried and tested framework. So we take you from exactly what we were just talking about. We take you from this kind of short-term mindset into this long-term mindset. And I think actually, before I even go any further, the book is really practical. So the idea is that, you read one step and you've got like 2 or 3 practical tools straight away to go and implement, because, we could all talk about what the best things to do are, but we really need to kind of give you practical tools that you can use. And that's what I really wanted to do. So step 1, it gets you very practically in that long-term mindset. And then step 2 is, and perhaps you'll recognize this, I certainly do, it's about managing some of those strong emotions that come with separating. How do you do that? Not disregarding the emotions, but how do you get a grip on them enough so that you can have a conversation? And I give you 3 steps to do, 3 practical tools to do that. And then in step 3, it's about setting boundaries, right? Critical when you're coming out of a relationship and you need to figure out how on earth you're going to co-parent with this person. So boundaries, and there's a bit of perspective work in there. And then step 4 is, communicating without conflict. That's probably the big one. But you do need all the others in order to get there. And that is things like, how do you listen well? Because when you listen well to people, they just feel heard and they just calm down. They're much less likely to be explosive if they feel that you've listened to them. What kind of language shouldn't you use? What are the kind of the big no-go words that inflame a situation and make it all blow up? And also, how do your kids hear what you're communicating? Because kids' brains develop differently. They're differently developed to adults until they're in their mid-20s. Then it's about how do you make decisions together, and what the framework is to do that. And then finally, is my favorite step probably is, going beyond the surviving thing that you're in to actually thriving. And it's not just about, it is about well-being and self-care, but it's more about looking at what you can control, what you can't control, how to let go of some of that stuff. So, really good for just general life as well.
Absolutely. And I'm really curious actually about the words to avoid. Are there specific words related to co-parenting? I mean, of course, there's, lots of derogatory words that spring to mind, but are there specific words that you would advise that are very, inflammatory for co-parents?
So anything where you go, you always, you never, you should. So that's front ending with the word you is just like a massive red flag. So just, if that is one thing that you take away from listening to this podcast, like, don't do that. Change it. Say, I feel, or it seems that. So make it really, really neutral. It might feel a bit awkward and it might feel a bit like, oh, it doesn't really sound like me. But actually the long-term goal of that is, let's not have an argument, right? So just remember that, even if it feels a bit strange to speak like that. And then the other one is I'm going to give you a non-co-parenting example. This chocolate cake is nice, but it could do with a bit of cream, right? You kind of negate everything positive that you've said beforehand if you use the word but. So don't use the word but, use the word and.
That is very, very helpful. I also heard a good tip last week, which is not just for co-parenting, but in general life, by kind of being sort of assertive in a, I suppose, soft way, which is, my preference would be, for something instead of like absolutely no way, is this happening? Just a kind of better way to say it. Yeah.
I love that. And the other thing you can do, if you really find that you're at loggerheads with your co-parent and it's really difficult to make a decision, is you don't make it about you and your co-parent, you make it about your kids. So, okay, so what does Jenny need in this situation? What does Mia need? What does Sam need? What would they want? What would they choose? And really that takes it away from you and your ex and brings it straight back to your kids. It's much easier to align when you're talking about somebody that you both love rather than when you're trying to win, if you like, against each other.
Definitely. So what is your view on parallel parenting?
So it's not always safe to co-parent, right? So if there have been any kind of abuse issues, safeguarding issues, then sometimes you're going to need to move into parallel parenting or shared parenting, which is a division of time rather than this idea of cooperative parenting. And I think that parallel parenting happens when, so forget any safeguarding issues for a moment, but if there are no safeguarding issues and you need to parallel parent because you don't know how to communicate together, then it can be a good stepping stone into co-parenting if you can try and keep that in mind, that you want to co-parent for your kids. And it can be a good stopgap, actually. A lot of people are like, oh no, parallel parenting, it's, don't do it. There's no communication. And sure, your kids don't feel quite as safely held because there's no information passing between houses. But if that means that you're not in conflict and that's the only way you can do it, then do that. Don't be in conflict.
I completely agree with that. And from personal experience, because I've been doing this now for 7 years, and I feel like I've, been experienced lots of different versions of co-parenting, from, what felt like very challenging circumstances to kind of, making the move to parallel parenting because it's what was needed at the time, to, thankfully, now in a much better situation where we can go and have, a meal with our son on his birthday and, around Christmas time, which honestly, there's been times where I just thought that we're never going to get there. So the reason why I'm sharing this is to give people listening some reassurance that if you're in one category that feels really, really challenging and difficult, and you almost feel like, it's never going to get easier. As I kind of overuse the term, it's not a linear path, but it really isn't. So there is hope. And sometimes you just have to choose whatever way is going to be the healthiest for you and the kid at that time.
100%. Got to do what you can do, right? You can't go too far out of your comfort zone. It's good to go a bit out of your comfort zone. It's good to try and it's good to aim for things. But if it puts you into panic mode, that's not necessarily good. Although in step 2 of the book, we do tell you how to get out of panic mode. So that's quite useful. I think that you stepping stones, and it's not a linear process. It really isn't a straightforward path. I completely agree with you.
Is there any kind of data around what works best for kids, or is there anything that you have implemented in this method that is backed by data?
The main thing that drives the method and from the data is that staying in sustained conflict is really bad for kids. And there have been lots of studies done on that. And there is a government study that's been done on that, which you can find on the government website if you can delve into the bowels of that. Though we do link out to it because it's important that people know that it's founded in something. There's surprisingly little studies having been done on co-parenting, although there is a piece of research happening at the moment that we are feeding into as well. But it boggles my mind that this is such a huge part of our society, and yet there hasn't been that many studies done on it.
I agree. And it is such a huge part of our society, and I think it's only going to continue. The stats are only going to continue rising as well. But it does seem like there are more focus on more studies coming out. And one thing that I really, is some research has shown, and what we like to share on Frollo, which is reassuring to parents, is that it takes one, even if you're in a dysfunctional co-parenting relationship, or even if there isn't another parent in the picture, if you're a solo parent or a widowed parent, it takes one healthy, loving home, for a child to thrive. So I think that's, so important for anyone listening this to also remember that the best thing that you can do is just focus on being the best that you can be within your control.
Love that. Completely agree.
So, Marcie, your book is coming out this week, which is very, very exciting. So by the time this episode goes live, the book will be available. So where can people find you? And is there a way of people working directly with you? Or, you can tell us where to find you.
Absolutely. So you can find us. Our website is thecoparentway.com. You can follow us on Instagram at The Co-Parent Way. We run an online program called The Co-Parenting Method, of course, like the book. And that's a 6-week co-parenting program, which gets amazing feedback. So there's a lot of learning. It's all anonymous, so it's nice and safe. We really look after you. You don't need to go through it with your co-parent. You can go through it on your own and create exactly what you just said, Zoe, that nice, stable environment on your own. There's loads of one-to-one support through that, and loads of tips and Marcie in your pocket, co-parenting blueprints, all of this stuff that you might need on your co-parenting journey. So you can find out more from our website.
Amazing. And if anyone has listened to this episode, found it helpful, and can think of another single parent in navigating this co-parenting dynamic, please do share it with that person, because it might be exactly what they need to hear. Marcie, thank you so much for joining me. Congratulations on your book already being a bestseller. And I'm really, really excited to learn more about it.
Thank you, Zoe. Thanks for having me.
And that's a wrap for this week. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If you did, then I have one small favour to ask. Please can you take a minute to subscribe to the Frollo podcast and give us a rating and review? This really helps other single parents who might benefit from it find us. The Frollo app, which is fully user verified for user safety, is available on the Google Play Store and the App Store, and you can find out more info and download links at www.frollo.com, or follow us on Instagram at Frollo app. And you can purchase your copy of our book, How to Be a Happy Single Parent, at all the major book retailers. Until next time, have a great week.